It's just on our YouTube.
On YouTube?
Yeah.
It's on EOS Detroit's YouTube.
Ah.
Looks like we're live. I don't know if the audio is working or not, though. The live stream's up, though.
Okay. Do we need, that looks good. Do we need headphones?
Yeah, it is. I can see it.
Is there audio?
Yeah, sound.
Yeah.
There's sound.
I think it's coming from
I just
here.
heard you say you need headphones. Is there audio?
Yeah, right now
You're like, what's picking up the sound? The camera is?
yeah. This is.
Hello. Just live?
Yeah.
You didn't hear just hello, did you? Is that
No.
okay.
It's going to be coming out of that, but we'd like to feed it into here as well. But the live streaming software
tear down the one hour. That's in bad shape.
I mean, it may even pick up the
Nice.
this thing over here.
And I want to build, you know, the goal is to build so that we kind of have.
That's amazing. Yeah, you need that passive income.
Yeah, it's a passive.
Well, yeah, once you build it, you don't have to work for it. I mean, like, you know, other money, you have to go somewhere every day and do a thing. Like, once you build that, it's the rent's just coming in. Yeah. Yes.
And things change over time.
But once doors are open, you should be good.
Yeah, we should be good. Whatever, insurance, we should be safe. Right now, we live unsafe.
Really? What do you mean?
Maybe I'll
Are you on the street that abuts the freeway?
Yeah.
Oh. Got it.
We got a lot. So I've been talking to Gary Conrad,
Nice.
and I ran up to Julio.
That name sounds familiar.
His brother is
Yeah.
he started helping me on the ferry in the 90s.
Okay.
I'll give all the content away. All the content.
I think Tanya introduced me to him. Does he have a big apartment building on my street on Kirby? Yes,
And
I did.
yeah, those new
And those two, the houses, those are so nice. You should have shown me those because then he was like, "Yeah, they're rented. You can't get it," but they are so nice.
new ones?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's
Yeah.
like the one that's like a big house and it has 4 units in it.
Yes.
Yes.
That's on the ferry, right?
Because now it's on my street on Kirby.
So then there's you have the new ones that are at Service Street.
Okay.
So
Oh, those are his at the end of my street.
So
Oh.
he's been in that neighborhood since the 90s.
See how?
As a kid.
See, we gotta put that word out. Like my street is full of black property owners in Midtown, but you would never know that. Okay, you would never know that.
Yeah.
And Sabrina Nelson owns the house across the street from me.
Oh, you know what? I never knew Sabrina lived there. I didn't know who she was until like recently.
Yeah.
Her and my mom used to say.
Really? That's amazing. Yeah, her house is gorgeous, and she has a giant lot. It's like yard. That's some significant property. Yeah, it's on the corner.
That's her house?
Yes. Yes. And her yard is like, you can fit a whole house there. I'm sure at one point there was more. Yeah.
So I remember my dad, every lot had a
Yeah.
My dad bought a couple of tour down the driveway, the garage behind the house, and then tore the other one down next to the parking lot, next to our house. So they had a parking lot. That's my content. What is she?
Maybe it's a show. Yeah.
It could be like a dramedy.
This week on Black Space.
That could be so fun.
Look respectful.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah, put the
How does one look
come on, can you put the red,
respectful?
can you put the blue solo cup down?
You're not even the good
I know, not even.
Not really.
They're the Olo cups. Off brand.
There we go. Just so that in case there was any doubt.
It's a big one. There's Brandon Christopher. He said he would be here. He was telling me there's some business there that comes with all the EOS. We had an interesting talk about like. Oh. What is it?
Is that a Motor City match?
She will
I know.
sideline you.
The second time she was
I was just gonna say, I've never seen you lose. You are so mean. That does not fit into your pleasure principles.
No, it is not. It is not part of my pleasure principles at all.
This area right here.
Interesting. his
Seven
thing.
living room. So
Yeah.
Well, the thing that we were talking about, hi Ian, why it came up was that we're thinking about like
Yeah, the realization, it's
fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to
Right.
really
I know.
convey.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I always just say all the things, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I've never tried it.
It's about a 2-minute drive. So I pulled up, I was like, so good.
Are we live right now?
Yeah, is that the microphone that's picking up?
This one is, but
Okay.
it'll. I think when you start talking through there, yeah.
Oh, there's a lot of opportunity.
I think we were low talking.
I got the volume turned down a little bit.
In real time.
It's Greg's Pizza still here? Greg's Pizza?
Yeah.
That's good all the time.
I grew up on the spaghetti.
Yeah? I just get the one thing slice. They have the best pizza.
Well, my parents were together. We were in Covington and then Fairway Drive. So you have on the other side.
Is that near the golf course or?
Yep. Fairway Drive is on the golf course. And then Covington's across from the park. The old 1001. They're not condos. They're really nice.
Yeah.
But yeah. Are you a big slider? Yeah.
Did you live in
There's a lot going on over there too.
It's not there anymore. That whole area is unfortunately it's not.
No, I
It has any type of economic development. Chalmers, Bakersfield, Chalmers area is still rough. Still rough over there. My grandparents.
You're trying to do lazy videotaping.
What's your point?
We get you a little stand.
No.
Where are you Facebooking living it on?
Huh?
What page are you Facebook living it on?
My base.
Oh.
Oh, did you FB live yourself? I'm here at Detroit Zip.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
About to get into this talk about black spaces.
We have 5 people watching the stream right now.
Oh, already? Alright.
Yeah, we haven't even done anything yet. Okay, 2 more minutes. I don't know. I just know if I was coming, I would probably get here like a quarter after.
See, I'm young.
While we're waiting, could some of you move forward? You're so far back. If you can move forward, we really appreciate
the bottom line.
That's what I got to do.
English ran a skirt something.
Now that I'm in the middle of the bar and stuff,
Oh.
yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Hello, everyone.
We're live streaming.
Yeah. Now you just know me a little bit better. The other side of Ingrid
Is it okay if I unplug this for a second and switch it to this other one?
Let's go ahead and check the text. Some information on the problems. Or we got some other
Really?
Nefertiti's in Cuba?
for it's not two things. It's not just going to be frustrating kind of on this
You guys have any
but more than that, it comes down to
business owners or
In here?
residents? Yeah.
the first 20 years, the agency was small but
Yeah.
right? And in 1990, the first election was made when they made it 30%. So when you become worried about that, it's just about so you can kind of come in and work with some of this stuff.
It's like city nonprofit work.
And so the agency they pursue all these policies that should
Did you guys check in?
abortion.
You know I'm off the radar. So. Else I would.
Are you don't have an online presence?
No, I just
On purpose?
on purpose. I gave it up about 3-4 years ago.
See?
You realize we switched to live streaming. You know the distraction that
Super distraction.
the product you buy when you use right. And each phone is different, so
Oh, that is weird.
right. So there's just a lot of people with narcissistic generation. So I said I couldn't. Mine too. Mine
Not as much as the millennials. Millennials are like
it drives me nuts.
way too posted.
It's crazy. Are you considered millennial? Millennial, yeah. I shouldn't do it. So I just click that. They are. Was that generation? All these letters. What's like Z or Z? Is it working?
Yeah.
It's scary. Yes.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. We're going to get started. Thank you all for coming to Tools for Preserving Black Spaces. First, I want to thank Detroit Zip for hosting us this evening. They're normally closed, and they opened it up for us. And please come when they're open and support them. They've been open for about 2 years now.
Yep, they're open Thursday and Sunday.
Yeah, so this is a great little shop if you've never been here before. Please come back. And yes, here we are about to have this really wonderful, exciting conversation. I am Ingrid LaFleur, your host tonight, and we have Lauren Hood, who's an urban planner here based in Detroit. And we have George Byers, who is the Chief Operating Officer of EOS Detroit. And Aubrey Ajit? Ajit.
You said it actually right. American version, bastardized it.
Okay, I get it, like LaFleur. Who is the co-founder of TrainX.ai. So a little bit about why I wanted to organize this talk. I am the Chief Community Officer of EOS Detroit. EOS Detroit is a block producer for the blockchain EOS, and we'll get into blockchain if that's all very confusing for you. But one of the things that we are looking at is creating blockchain solutions for grassroots actions. And I've been organizing these kinds of larger conversations so that we have an understanding of how emerging technology can address potentially some of these issues that we've been talking about for quite some time. I'm very much inspired by Lauren Hood's work holding these conversations about preserving Black spaces. And in that inspiration, I thought, well, maybe we could have a conversation about how technology can further support whatever ideas have emerged from these conversations. And so just to kind of give you an idea about how emerging technology can really support Black communities especially, but marginalized groups in general. There was a world building exercise that happened last year in Los Angeles. Tony Patrick was part of that world building exercise, and he actually filmed he filmed Black Card here. It's a short film, please look it up, it's really great. But he shared with me, during that experience, they came up with this idea of ancestral AI. And so basically, their idea was that there would be this AI that would kind of replicate our ancestors and that would work with you to deal with some of the more kind of harder things to deal with, i.e. government, financial institutions, so on and so forth. So this AI would specifically attend to our emotional state and to help guide us through these processes that many of us are traumatized by, simply because of the level of racial discrimination that we endure, if not all the other really long list of discrimination that many of us are dealing with. So I thought that that was a really creative thought process, and so that is just basically my inspiration. And thinking about blockchain technology, I'm going to just quickly explain it, and then we're going to go into depth. Do not be intimidated. It is quite literally just a record of data. Just hold that in your mind. It's a record of data that gets compounded and listed into one block. And then when that's full, there's another block, and they're connected, and that creates a blockchain. The thing about blockchains is that it's immutable, meaning you can never change it, and it is transparent. Blockchain technology is the technology behind the cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin. So I know you've heard of Bitcoin. But there's over 900 cryptocurrencies, and there's different types of blockchain technologies. One of the really wonderful things that I like about blockchain technology is you can create things like a decentralized autonomous community. And we can get into that further, and I do have handouts, by the way, a glossary and a breakdown of terms and ideas and blockchain itself. But you know, it's these kinds of concepts of being able to create communities that serve each other based on their own needs and wants. And so this technology can help make that process more efficient. We all must keep in mind that emerging technology is just a tool that humans use, right? And so it's the humans that we really, are focused on. Hopefully will shift perspectives so that we can create new kinds of systems and institutions that are no longer harmful or violent to Black bodies or any marginalized groups. So it's about creating an equitable future. Lauren, I really wanted to hear more about your experience in these talks. If you can kind of give us the breakdown so we can have that foundation to build off of.
Sure. I'll talk a little bit about how I started thinking about Black spaces. So in a city that is 80% Black, it seems odd to have to be thinking about Black spaces, right? But it came about, I used to run a nonprofit in this neighborhood, and there was a lot of outside pressure to bring new development without being intentional about what it was. It was like, let's just occupy these storefronts with something new and sexy and not consider if the people in the neighborhood actually wanted those things, could afford those things, or would feel comfortable in those spaces. So I was like, okay, we have to be, this is happening all over the city. So I started thinking that we needed to have conversations about, we needed to shift our consciousness about preserving spaces for Black people in the changing city. Again, it seems so strange to say we're still 8 out of every 10 people here, but if you frequent places that are newly developed, you might not see that. Like I could plop any of us down in certain neighborhoods in the city, you know, blindfold you and have you say, okay, where do you think you are? And I feel like the last place on the list that you would think of is like actually Detroit, Michigan. So what does it look like to preserve spaces for Black people and white friends? That doesn't mean you can't come. It doesn't mean it's not for you, but it also doesn't mean you can approach it in a voyeuristic way like a National Geographic, like surveying the Black person in their natural environment. You can be there, but you should participate. You should also put yourself out there. So when we're in spaces that we're really liberated and being free, we're like showing ourselves, we're being vulnerable. And I think for it to be equitable, you have to do some of that too. So don't just come and gawk, like participate. But I really think it's important to not only work to preserve Black spaces, but we have to say it. I feel like so many people in powerful positions and leadership positions are afraid to say Black, and I'm talking about Black people. So for starters, we have to be not afraid to say it, not afraid to talk about it, not worry about how it's perceived by certain groups, just understand the importance of it in this particular moment in time when change is happening so quickly. Like there isn't time for fear, there isn't time for worrying about your own set of circumstances. Like collectively we have to do something or we won't be welcome in this space anymore. So that's where the thinking came from.
Could you quickly define what a Black space is?
Ooh. So see, I'm hesitant to do that. So there are about 500,000 Black people in Detroit, and I bet if you asked each one of them, there would be a different answer for what a Black space is. So a lot of people in the conversations have said it means Black people own the space. A lot of people talk about the programming of the space. For me right now, what I think it means is what happens in the space. We talk a lot about the urban consulate, like my friend Claire Nelson, who is white, started urban consulate, but a lot of times that is a very Black space. Like I've hosted conversations in there where a white friend would be like, now I know this is a Black space tonight, can I sit in the front, where should I sit, can I take notes? So, and that's clearly like not necessarily what you would consider a Black space, but in some moments it is. So I think it differs, but for me right now, what I think is important for a Black space is we need to do some cross socioeconomic mixing. So people like to think of Black folks as a monolith, and I think what we've been doing is a lot of us that have access. So I would argue that every Black person in the room has some access, some acumen, you know, a good position where you know some people, but those cousins that we always leave behind, like the reason they got that way is because we haven't included them. So I feel like what we need now is some spaces where we can mix. I'd like to see some magical collisions take place. Like what can we learn from each other if we're in the same space? Because I think if I'm thinking back to my own childhood, it wasn't encouraged that I hung out with those Black people. So I've had to do like a lot of deprogramming of myself, and I know that collectively we need to do that. But again, at this moment in time, if we really want to ensure that we collectively have space here, we need to be talking to each other. And I don't think it's just like those of us in the room that have something to teach the other. I think we have something to learn from them as well. But we don't really have enough spaces where it's comfortable for both of us to be. So there's some places where the Black elites like to hang out, and then there's some places where the hood niggas like to hang out. But what would it look like if we all hung out in the same space and shared ideas and talked about what we were working on? Like, I feel like that can guarantee our future position in the city, but we don't do that enough.
So it's about crossing those class lines and culture lines and coming together, and I'm sure we would have way more fun.
Yeah.
George, can you tell us a little bit about your work and your thoughts about preserving Black spaces?
Hello. First of all, I want to get a survey of who in the audience is maybe a resident or a business owner or live in the local community. So the first thing I want to ask is, who here is a business owner? Okay, who lives nearby? Let's say within a 1 or 2 mile radius. Not very many. Okay, well, I'll give you guys a little bit of background about myself. Actually, I grew up on the east side. I grew up in Ravendale, pretty rough area, Chalmers, Dickerson area. Hasn't seen too much urban renewal or
revitalization, if you will. And so I attended a private business school on a track and field scholarship. And about 2 years into school, I realized that this just wasn't for me. Tuition was $45,000, $50,000 a year. I had a $30,000 track and field scholarship. My dad looked at me like I was crazy when I actually signed a Parent Plus loan. So I ended up leaving, and I think I left because I had to. You know, I had no other choice. We're talking about a private business school with predominantly white, wealthy people. And I was terrified. I was just absolutely terrified. But what had happened was I saw a lot of my professors kind of powwow behind me and support me. And I think part of the reason being is because they saw that I was a minority, but they saw the drive that I had. And so after running my own venture for a couple of years, I got into corporate America. And it was crazy. It was, honestly, it was life-changing. At the time, I think I was 21, 22 years old. So not only was I experiencing ageism, but racism. And it's very subtle racism. You know, it's the kind of racism where someone holds a door open for the guy in front of you who's a white guy, and he says, "No problem, dude." And he holds it open for me, he's like, "There you go, brother." You know, and this is a white guy. And as I was going through this whole, I'm still in corporate America, but I hold a senior level position actually coaching other people. As I was going through my transition and learning, you know, I saw that there was a clear need in the community, and there was a complete disconnect between the very technological competent black people or minorities, women, Indians, Asians, and the people that, you know, in a sense left behind, our cousins, you know, the people that we weren't encouraged to hang out with. So lately, I've been advocating and giving presentations and speeches about minorities. I've spoken at a couple of graduations and commencements about it, and what it really means to give back to the community. And I think what happens is, when most people think about community, they may think about community in the aspect of physical or geological community. But community is skin deep, it's blood deep as well. And so when it comes to preserving black spaces, and I'm not an expert in, you know, in terms of like sociology or anything like that, I come strictly from a technological standpoint. For me, the people that I've helped, it really comes down to sharing that knowledge and opening the door, extending the door for someone else, you know, so that my brothers, my sisters can be black tech leaders. Because aside from Mother Nature, technology is the #1 disruptor out there. And if black communities are being disrupted by large white conglomerate bureaucratic companies, we're screwed. So we really have to stick together. So, you know, I'm here actually just to kind of speak in terms of a technological background. And as Ingrid already said, I want to echo it back, I am the COO of a startup, you know, Detroit-based startup. And it's definitely different being a business leader and technology leader and being a young black man. So just from, I guess, a heart to heart, you know, because I'm looking at the audience, most of you men and women are black. You really have to, you can't be oblivious or ignorant to what's really going on. And a lot of us, you know, we use Facebook, we use Instagram, but we don't know the driving forces of these or how they're made and how they're developed. But yet, I've seen a lot of times when a young, aspiring black man will come up to me and he says, "Hey, I have this idea for this crazy cool mobile app." And I'm like, "Okay, what is it?" "No, let me hear it." And then he'll go out and he'll pitch it to all these people. You know, and he gets so much hate. "Oh, that'll never work out, that'll never work out." We're talking black people. You know, we're not necessarily talking Caucasians, or white people, if you will. So I think what really needs to happen is we should stand behind each other and understand that when you download Facebook, when you download Twitter, that you're making a conscious or maybe a subconscious decision to invest in that corporation who may or may not be doing anything for your community. And you know, this kind of circles back to knowing the brand. So it's really important that, especially we as Detroiters, that we focus on local companies. You know, the Quicken Loans, the people that are employing people close to home, the Ford, the General Motors. And so yeah, that's my little tidbit.
Great. I would love more about TrainX AI, and I know that you're training people of color to learn how to code within AI. Am I saying that right? Yes. I would love to know why that is important, and of course more about the program.
So, thanks for having me. So, I work at Wayne State University during the day, and what we set up to do at Wayne State was to help entrepreneurs become more technical. And what we saw was that a lot of black folks were technical, had technical skills, and their white counterparts that had similar skills had a higher rate of getting hired. A higher rate of getting hired. I mean, we kind of suspected that to begin with, but what we mulled over was we kept doing these hackathons, these hacker workshops, and it was great and everything, but we said, okay, we have to do a bigger effort to try to help individuals that have skills get into positions or to become entrepreneurs. So what we decided to do was to start a company to do training, and our mission is to train folks of color in technology. And so my co-founder, Matt Hendricks, who is the computer scientist. I am not the computer scientist. I just play one on TV. Okay, so he said, okay, we're going to do a company and we're going to help black folks advance in technology. Let's pick the top technology. And so we said, let's do artificial intelligence. So that's why we started TrainX. And then also, I mean, we saw that again there was lack of jobs that were being received, but we also saw just so much talent, right? Just not really getting an opportunity to grow. And so TrainX isn't just about let's train individuals in artificial intelligence and hope they get a job. We also work at trying to get them jobs, get them projects so they can contract or get hired in. So we're brand new. We just started our second cohort. We've got about 5 students actually now in our program. But we also encourage and teach them that they already had skill sets. You know, we help them, you know, realize that they were powerful to begin with, right? That's a lot of times you see that a lot of folks, when they go out to do interviews, they are so fearful, especially blacks in technology. They're fearful that, you know, somebody won't understand that they're skilled or that they're qualified, and we're there to let them know they are, right? And so we have to work on projects that actually can be published, that potential employers can see. So you can go on our website right now, trainx.ai, and there's an example of our first cohort and the project they did. They did an autonomous vehicle, like I call it a butler app, where it takes your information from your calendar as well as Foursquare and Google Maps, and when you put in your calendar where you'd like to go at such time, the AI will look at that, all 3 of those databases, those data sets, and it will say, look, we know you said that you wanted to go to Cuzo. Is it Cuzos? My bad. Every time I think I'm going to mispronounce something, yeah, Cuzos. At this, you want to go at 1 o'clock. We're suggesting you go at 11:30. So it looks at your schedule and where you're going, and it determines a better time to go. So it's a blast. We are housed in Midtown. So Matt Hendricks, my partner, he has 3 different businesses, and they all run out of Flyball Labs, which is his space right next to Treat Dreams on Cass Avenue. And so not only are his 3 businesses going on there, plus TrainX, he's got buddies that he lets use the space to run some of their business opportunities as well. So that is a black-owned space that is very open and welcoming, and people walk by all the time going to Treat Dreams, and they're looking there like, they look and they do a double take, like they see all these black people on computers. They're like, what's going on? And that's intentional. That's intentional. That's to say we're here and we're producing great talent. We're helping great talent get to where they want to be. So TrainX is it helps on the technology side, but really it's also a location. It's a safe place
where people can come and grow.
Awesome, it's its own black space.
Yes.
So it's like we're talking about different types of black spaces, right? There's the physical black space for the businesses. There's the internal black space that's within our own bodies. And then there's the black space online. And I think that one of the areas that we might struggle most with is online, as George pointed out. We don't really understand how the internet works. We don't realize that a lot of these services are free because they're making money off of the data in which we're constantly giving freely, hopefully with joy. And so, you know, that lack of awareness has always been my concern as we're moving really fast with technology, and it's changing and it's growing. And people are using it outside of the Black community to really support their own work, their own future visions. And so that's why I'm really interested in more people learning to code, which I'm going to take an intro to coding class at Grand Circus. It's free Tuesdays at 6 o'clock. Come with me. But then just to be aware of where your data is going. And so one of the things that blockchain technology can do is help us to own our own data. And so the thing that you have to understand with blockchain technology, it was really built to empower the people. There is a full-on philosophy and ethos behind it. And the main point of it is to make sure that the people have ownership. And one of it is creating these kinds of digital cooperatives in a way, which I think is really interesting, like decentralized autonomous communities. So I have a question for you, Aubrey. I'm wondering, you know, AI, I don't think that we realize how much AI is already active in our world. And I'm wondering, like, how does it create an equitable future? Or how can we use it to create equitable futures for Black bodies or those who have been historically marginalized?
So technology is supposed to be the great equalizer, and artificial intelligence is the big technology that is the future and is now. So artificial intelligence not only is it, if you learn how to develop in artificial intelligence, it's not only opens doors for you for like opportunities and to possibly contract. Let me just take a step back. Our model, what we've noticed is that we went out to California to the global artificial intelligence conference called NIPS. That stands for Neural Interface, I forgot the PS stands for, but we talked to about 100 individuals that are AI developers, and all of them were PhDs. And so what they stated, and what we knew, what we had a hunch of and did research on, was that much like the internet and the World Wide Web established a long time ago, you had very advanced individuals, very advanced degrees, think tanks that kind of built up everything. But then all of a sudden, over time, it became accessible to everybody, right? Anybody can build. How many of you built your own website and don't know how to code, right? You know how to code. So the point is that so there's great opportunity in artificial intelligence, right? It's very empowering. There's a huge need for it, and not the companies out there want to implement AI projects, and some are, but they need more help. They need more staff, but they don't necessarily know how to implement those projects. So if you go through programs like ours, you can learn how to implement those projects and work at a company and lead those projects. Or you can contract yourself out, right? That's one of the things we're trying to push out. We're trying to have our students and our graduates contract themselves as a team to these companies. So that's an empowering thing too. So at our company, what we try to do is encourage them to stick together, so that you know, a lot of times when an individual gets a job and they go into big corporate America, they kind of feel like they're swallowed up, right? You got to put on a certain face every day. I worked at GM at the Warren Tech Center, and you know, every day I heard some kind of right-wing crap every day, and you know, it's in Macomb County, so I had to learn how to just kind of, you know, get around that, make a statement, but not like get into a fight, like get pulled into a fight.
That switch.
Yeah, that switch. Yeah,
Y'all know
yeah.
what switch is.
Yeah, so don't. I didn't want to hit the switch, but I wanted to make my, take a stand and then go to work, right? You know, say something and go on. So what we're doing is we're having individuals work together. We're not only empower them individually, but we want them to be teams so that they can, you know, in greater numbers together, you're stronger together, basically. Instead of being an individual that's out, you know, somewhere working and, you know, looking for a job where your skill levels are here and your job is there. It's very hard to move up. You get stereotyped or whatever. You get pigeonholed. And so one thing we're trying to push is teamwork. And so that allows individuals again to do a lot more and to build their skills together. So also AI is an equalizer in that it's going to help the community. It's not going to be Skynet, I hope, right? I hope it's not going to be Skynet. Not many science fiction. Who doesn't know what Skynet is? Terminator? Oh, come on. Hey, wrong crowd. So the point is that artificial intelligence will become a bit more accessible to folks, people that of color. If we get more involved in it now, we can then use it to solve issues. I mean, eventually somebody's going to be able to say, look, let's look at breast cancer of a certain mutation, and let's grab all the data we can off the internet so we can figure out how to do gene therapy for this individual. So in the near future, you're going to be able to just say that or type that into something that's very easy to use, like a website template, right? It's not there now, and it'll be able to solve problems, big problems. So more people of color, if they get involved in that, will be able to solve problems within our community. And will also to help stave off a lot of these models that are biased just because of who programs them. So like there have been some problems where you've had, I forgot what city, but they had, you know, those street cameras, right? So a lot of times some of the programs they put together through AI are biased themselves of who's on the street and claim, you know, and states, you know, potential criminal because they see somebody of color, right? And it's not, I don't think the people did that intentionally. It's just that, you know, the people that were programming it were biased, right? Unconsciously or
It's the data they collect. They did do it intentionally.
They did intentionally?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
They did it
What city was this?
Seattle,
Okay.
Portland, Oregon, Houston, Texas. Wherever you find it, it's intentional.
Right.
I know that
It is not by accident. It is absolutely by design.
Right.
in AI,
In AI data science, there's something called a training model. And the training model, basically what happens is you take a huge aggregate of data, and you give it to a program. The program will take that data, and it'll learn from it. And then you can give it another set of data called the control. And what the control does is it says, hey, no, I want the result to be somewhat closer to this. So then the AI or the computer, the program, will actually go through and it'll redo the results and it'll keep redoing it. And basically, there's been a couple of case studies about this actually where it was not intentional. What happened was that the data was actual real life data, but because we live in a very prejudiced world, the data sets themselves were prejudiced, so the AI was learning prejudice.
So that is intentional.
Well, it was not intentional from the degree of the software engineers. It's definitely systematic, tainted data.
Okay, you create the system though. I mean, some human is interpreting the information in a certain way.
But then they correct it. You train the data model.
We don't need to make this the issue of the night. Go ahead.
fair
No,
issue.
yeah,
It's a fair
yeah.
issue.
Think you want to take a stab?
I just wanted to ask a question. Well, my thinking is that a lot of people are unaware of their latent racial bias.
Yeah.
So intent, is a slippery slope. So it might be there, but they might not have known that they had this racial bias that they were programming. But my question with AI, though, if humans have bias and humans program AI, doesn't it hold true that AI would have those biases?
Yes.
Like, how do you get ahead of that, though?
Right. So,
So how you get ahead of that is you've got to speak up, right? So a couple companies have come to us and they've asked us to help them to eliminate that, right? So what we need to do as a collective is to speak out against that. So you bringing that up, so you saying that it was intentional, I don't want to dismiss that at all, right? Because it's serious, right? It needs to change. So it could have been a few individuals or 1,000 individuals that thought of it intentionally. And their junior programmers might have just did whatever the heck they said, right? Or it might have unconscious biasness, whatever. But what we need to do is we need to speak up. We need to collect together. There's organizations such as like Afrotech or actually Black in AI. That's an amazing organization. That's a global organization. So in my opinion, we need to be activists when it comes to artificial intelligence as well, and demand that things be equitable and fair and advantageous to us as well.
So this requires a level of digital literacy that we need at such an early stage in our lives, right?
Yes.
And as adults to be curious enough to go and learn about it.
Right.
And I think what's interesting with AI, I know some people who are working to ensure that our culture is represented, even in like the voices that are used. I've been waiting for this. I would love, huh?
Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, or just like, the chick around the way who's telling me the GPS, like, I told you not to go that way. Like, I need a conversation. Like, I would just really love that kind of interaction.
That's like a project.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay.
Let's do that. I mean, so we're playing around with Alexa right now, and we're trying to manipulate it. So, yeah,
Right now we're playing around with Alexa right now. We're trying to manipulate it right now. So that's a fun thing to do too, is that to empower through the hackathons that we had at Wayne State. That's like a safe place. That's fun. I mean, those are great opportunities to do things such as that, to take Alexa and give it different voices. And there's different ringtones. Why not different voices for Alexa? So Keisha or Kiki or something.
Yeah.
Alexis. I know a lot of white Alexis.
Hilarious. I wanted to look up something, but
Does anybody have a question? Yeah.
I have a question for Lauren. Since you're an urban planner, and I'm talking about physical spaces, and you intimated in your first statement about new development occurring in this town where we're seeing some changes or a disregard for the people actually that reside in that community. What do you see as solutions to that?
Organizing. We don't get together enough and plan and plot and scheme and you know what I mean? I was telling somebody earlier, like when we get together for these kind of events, like beforehand, you're like, you know what, we really should get together and talk about what we're working on, see how we could work together, see how blockchain might be able to help what we're working on, but we never follow up, we never do it. So for some reason, we're deprioritizing that connection. I'm not sure what it is, but I feel like our value system is jacked up right now. So we're putting some other things ahead of the value of us getting together and talking about what we're working on. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm trying to be intentional about it. But yeah, the key is organizing. We just all have to talk more. And I mean, like across the city. So I'm always like, oh, there are no black spaces. But you know what? Over at Mac and Bewick, there's probably some space where people are having conversations, and solving community problems, but I just don't know about it because I don't get to the east side. And nobody over here is talking to anybody over there. So I feel like organizing is the key.
So, I mean, I always want to do like a takeaway. And so I'd love to know like the hours of this place so that possibly there could be a community meeting, like on a monthly basis.
I talk about how can we preserve black spaces, right? And have some, I mean, this is a coffee house. This is where everything happens. It's black owned.
Can we do that? Can we do that?
What are your hours?
So right now it's only open Thursday through Sunday. Thursday and Fridays from 6:30 in the morning to 5, Saturday from 8 to 4, and Sunday from 10 to 4.
So we do them early meetings, y'all. Early, 7 a.m.
Yep.
Right? So, and you want to see a place like this stay too, right? It's beautiful, right?
Yes.
When you feel bad, if like a year from now, I ain't trying to say no bad, you're not saying.
Now 1 year in November.
When y'all but I think again we just need to take that first step, just to meet together. So Thursdays at 7 a.m. Who's gonna be here? 7 a.m. 7:30. 7:30. 8 o'clock.
You gonna come on?
Hey.
Yep.
It's because you
All right,
live in
I'll
the
be there
neighborhood.
All right.
Go to.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I have, did I say it? So I have you brought up something related to AI having some sort of connection with like helping the black community to kind of address what it sounds like a lot of trauma in systems. Like, can I hear more about that from, I don't know who you make reference to?
Yeah, I brought that up with a world building exercise. So it was more of a thought exercise, and it was actually inspired by Grace Lee Boggs, the longtime activist. Grace Lee was another person who was part of the world building exercise, and she did the documentary on Grace Lee Boggs. But I just know here and there about people who are really trying to figure out how do we not only create new systems, but also help black bodies heal so that we can create new relationships to these systems, because trust has been lost, right? We don't really trust government, we don't trust financial institutions, generally speaking, we don't really feel safe around police, you know, it can go on, right? And so there are many different groups that are working on it. And do you know of more? Her question? Yeah.
So what I like to do is again, one of the largest group that I know of that focuses on these issues is Black in AI, and that's global. So it's folks in Africa, it's folks of African descent in Europe, as well as Caribbean, and large in the U.S. So what I would like to do is take some action, and maybe I can send something out that shows a lot of the AI projects that are going on that are helping to fight these traumas and fight, to help give us resources. And then what we should do too is, if there isn't something, then we should list what we want to see done, right? And then get with folks like at our office or EOS Detroit or other organizations and see how we can start implementing those. So I mean, the future is wide open. So if it's not there, let's work on trying to get it there. No, I'm sorry, let's not say try, it's passive. Let's work on getting it there.
And any resources and things that we mentioned, I can email it out if you guys sign the mailing list, and make sure that you have that information. I just quickly wanted to mention that the Black Blockchain Summit that happened in DC is going to have a hackathon in November. And I just kind of wanted to just share with you some of the things that they would like projects on. And so a hackathon, George corrects me, is when people get together and try to create and build, I guess, an application of some sort that will solve for an issue. So some of the issues that they want people to address: build a platform to keep law enforcement in check and institute penalties such as malpractice fees to discourage corruption and maintaining evidence integrity. Build a platform that allows for digitization of ownership and property rights for Indigenous people. Build a platform that fairly disperses tokenized funds to projects that empower Indigenous people. Build a platform that rewards creativity and protects cultural and intellectual property rights for Indigenous people. Build a platform that enhances the adoption of sustainable energy solutions within local communities. There's actually 11 different agenda items that they have set forth. And so that's just an example of how people are thinking and what happens when Black people are coming together to look at how they can create the solutions for certain things that maybe other groups aren't thinking about within blockchain technology. And so that's why, again, to reiterate what George and Aubrey have been talking about, this is why we need people to be more technologically savvy so that we can create these things. We need more of us to be involved so we can have that perspective and that voice represented. Oh yeah, Eric, what's your question?
Sure. So you were talking earlier about how bias, both sort of implicit and intentional, can negatively impact how systems work. And one of the things that sort of leads to mind is out in California, for example, they recently passed a law that got rid of money bail, and instead of leaving it up to the judge's discretion, one of the things they use is an algorithm that takes into account the person's history, their criminal history, their likelihood to flee, all that. But that, of course, is already, there's the bias there because how you get charged and what how you're previously sentenced has all been impacted by so the racist elements of our judicial system, criminal justice system. So I guess the question I have is, one, how do you get people to trust systems because people don't? They don't want to give their information because of this kind of bias. And two, what can you do to correct this kind of bias to begin with, right?
So alongside being the CEO of EOS Detroit, I'm also the CEO of a company called, So the question was, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly, how do we, in essence, create transparency within the legal system, right? Within the judicial legal systems of the country that we live in. And aside from EOS Detroit, I'm also a co-founder of a startup called Quartz Legal. My co-founder is based in Cleveland. She is an attorney, her name is Clarissa, and I myself am a software engineer and architect. And what we're basically doing is we're collecting data from every public docket in America, and we're putting this into a huge data store, and then we're running algorithms on it, and we're making it publicly available. So for the first time in history, let's say Brandon gets a speeding ticket, and then Brandon goes to jail, right? You shouldn't go to jail for a speeding ticket, but that information is publicly available on the docket. And what we can do is we can look at every single case, so this is public, every single case in every single city, in every single state in this country, and we can run data analysis on the patterns. And so we take this information, we put it on the blockchain. It's immutable, it's public, it's a public ledger, it's distributed. So if a computer goes down, another computer has a copy of that data. And in essence, what you can then do is you can hold the system accountable. And so we're actually able to track patterns throughout history. We're talking 100 years back. Dockets are old. And this is something that's happening in real time. We're probably about a good 3 or 4 months out of actually like a development, something we can actually show the public, but it's something we've been developing for close to a year now. And I hope that addresses that. This is actually something we thought about because she's an attorney and she said, it's just not right. And I said, what's not right? Well, I have clients, I have a civil case and I have a criminal case, and I need to make them both. And if I don't make one and if I don't make the other, it still looks bad. It still points against her license. But this one's really important because this man does not deserve this type of, punishment. And, I looked at her and I said, let's solve that problem. And so about a year ago, we set out to solve this problem. And we'll see where it goes, but with the emergence of AI and blockchain technology, there's a lot you can do. And with things being immutable, you can't hide. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't. So that's...
This reminds me of a case that I heard about, and please forgive me, I don't know the specifics, but there's a man who is serving time in prison, and he's of course trying to advocate to saying that he's innocent, but the issue is that at this point I think it's just so much time has passed that all the judges involved in his case, all the lawyers involved in his case are all dead, and they don't have any record of him on any of the records that they might have in that space, in that judicial space.
There's 82 cases like that in this city alone.
So there's 82 cases like that in the city alone? Wow.
People were supposed to get, people got things, cases got lost, prosecutor lost the files, defense lost the files, courts doesn't have the files, judges aren't around, lawyers aren't around, and these people are just in limbo. Their only records are their jail records. They know we're here for a crime, but they have no idea about the courts.
Yeah, they have no, so it's only the jail records that they have. They don't have any other record. So they just know that the person committed a crime and they're supposed to be in jail. But so that causes a lot of issues, right? Especially when we're thinking about people of color being unjustly imprisoned and creating this slave labor and continuing that slave system. I think it's extremely important to use blockchain technology because, again, when we're talking about preserving Black spaces, we need the Black bodies home, and we need all their talent and experience and know-how to build and to fortify and to support all of these spaces and hopefully new systems that we create. So we need the participation of everyone. Our brothers and sisters that are in prison do need to be coming home. Yes, you have a question? Yeah. Oh, I thought you had a question.
I do, but I just
I called on you.
Okay.
Before I saw your concern.
So a lot of what I'm hearing about kind of the criminal justice system and kind of how we want to keep it more transparent and really accountable to us as humans. I wonder, does anybody on the panel have any thoughts about how the school to prison pipeline and like how that can be addressed through technology?
How can the school to prison pipeline be addressed through technology?
Through AI or
through AI, blockchain, or any? How can the school to prison pipeline be addressed or disrupted using technology?
I'm just looking at through a couple of the major research projects that are on the Black and AI board. Just FYI, I didn't mention this earlier, but Black and AI will have a conference. They're probably about 2,000 people there in Montreal on December 7th and 8th. So just look that up. If you want to talk to me later, I can give you information on that. It's pretty economical. I think registration is very small, but it'll be in Montreal. Okay, so to get back to that point, how do we use technology to disrupt the school to prison pipeline? So in the case of artificial intelligence, what can be done is collecting just first of all the data and do comparisons, right? You can do comparisons like George said, the control, right? Typically individuals that are white that are in prison, we could show how they may their records or whatever are a lot different than those that are African American, right? And we could show to the schools, right? What schools are kind of targeted, what areas, and just kind of shame the system. But I don't think that's enough. I mean, you can do all types of blockchain or AI, and you can pull all this information together, and you can show the discrepancies like really plainly, really boldly. But shaming is the first step. The second step is what can we do in our spaces? What can we do? What can we do to protect those children so they don't end up in prison, right? We can't say, all right, system, you're bad. Look at this, right? Look at the technology. This is the facts pulled all together through all our technology, right? That's not going to change the system. What's going to change the system is us. So we have to have ownership. So it's one, technology can grab this information, show it plainly how it's wrong. It could show possibly even in some areas where it's changed, where people actually have been activists and changed it, made a dent in it, right? I know California is like, that's just huge, right? It's huge everywhere. I don't know if some states figured out how to improve that, or not improve it, to disrupt it. So yeah, George. Yeah, I actually have a friend named Kendra. She's actually a teacher of teachers. I'm not a teacher, so I don't know what that means. But she's from Seattle, and she just moved here to Detroit. She's a white woman, and she said, I feel bad because I feel like I'm contributing to gentrification. But at the same time, 90% of my students are black. And so we started talking about the education system. So the pipeline from school to prison, we know it's there, it exists in our community, it's rampant. And what we determined was that it really boils down to rewarding, a reward system. Our current educational system is not rewarding. I mean, students go to school for 18 years, or what, 12, 16 years, and by the time they're 18, we're asking them to make a $100,000 debt decision to go to college in a degree that may or may not pay off. And this isn't just a black thing, but it's more rampant in black communities. And so they go to school with no type of financial literacy, they get in debt, and they don't get a degree. Or if they do get a degree, there's no promise that that degree will work and that will pay off. And I know for myself, and there's been several other black men that I have, and women, that I've worked with throughout the years who are software developers. And one thing that we noticed about this particular trade is that it's immediately rewarding. I can go to Google and I can look up how to do something, and I can go and apply it, and I can get a check for that. If you're working with any number of cohorts, that's big. That's huge. I don't have to go to school. I don't have to run the streets. I don't have to sell drugs. I don't have to dish out mixtapes. I can sit on Google, I can learn something, I can read a book, I can make a website and make $500 that week. And so I think the problem with, and this isn't, like I said, this isn't just a black thing, this is education in general, is that it's not rewarding. Or if you do get rewarded, it's when you're 23 years old and get that degree, and you land that first job making $50,000, $60,000, but you're 120 grand in debt.
I just wanted to make a really quick comment about that. Detroit faces a 64% poverty rate when you add the working poor. In Nairobi right now, they're developing an application on the blockchain that basically rewards kids to go to school. So basically they earn a cryptocurrency so that then they can be able to contribute to their families while also being able to go to school. So they're usually prevented from going to school because they have to work with their family to make money. And we've been in conversation about how that could be very useful here in Detroit. If kids can make money while they're going to school and know that they can contribute to their family, you don't know how many times I've heard of students who have to go to food shelters right after school. So, those are those really key things that could disrupt the school to prison pipeline, because now that desperation is lowered, and so I don't have to look to criminal activity to provide for my family. I just want to call on Kyle, because her hand was up, and then Brandon, and then Nate.
I don't know if anyone else had mentioned this, but when you were discussing the gentleman that was in prison who his records were totally obsolete, is anyone working directly with the Detroit rape kids and the testing of technology with blockchain? Because I was just at the RSU talk with the Levies who are raising money, and Sasha Center and other women that are working on it, and it just feels like such a big problem and a big issue. And it's obviously very in the forefront right now that if there's 10,000 rape kits, the amount of people that, even just approaching the women and how to do all that, like to come back 10, 15, 20 years, and it's like, and I feel like they were taking it on a case-by-case basis because it was just so overwhelming. Is there any kind of hackathon or even discussion with Sasha Centers or anything like that? Because until Black spaces heal or feel like they're being listened to, I think it's hard to even move too much further forward.
Yeah, so the question is there technology to help the process of going through the rape kits that we have here in Detroit? Do you know of anything?
Well, the problem with technology is it moves very fast. So I could sit right here and tell you no, but that may not be the case, because with technology, there's something created every single day, every single minute. Off the top of my head, I don't think so. You know, I think I'd kind of be on top of it or be in my inbox or something like that, unfortunately. But like I said, this is with technology, especially software. You know, you're creating something out of thoughts. So I don't see why there should be any type of delay with getting something like that out there. You know, it just takes the right mindset and the right people, and the overhead to produce something like this is very minimal. You know, you don't need brick and mortar to create AI-driven technology or blockchain-driven technology. You need to go to your local library and get a free library card and, you know, get on the computer for free. It doesn't really cost you anything except for time. So off the top of my head, I can't think of anything like that. But I think it's time we start rallying people together and taking care of what needs to be taken care of here in the city before we try to tackle world problems, let's tackle local problems.
And that will serve as an example for the world, because Detroit is the leader in all things.
I totally agree with that. So you mentioned hackathon. I think that's a great, I mean, as George was saying, you can't think of an actual technology that's there. It might be something, right? But I think if we wanted to host like a hackathon here, you know, over a weekend, and kind of list out all of technologies that help with those cases and the rape kits. I think that's a great idea. I think we should do that.
There's also that whole element of also keeping it encrypted, right? Because until it gets to the right people's hands, it might just be assigning numbers to things and not necessarily names and all that other stuff, right?
Right.
So it's kind of the ideal local, not ideal local case, I know that doesn't sound exactly right, but a hackathon or something.
So the key is, what you're saying is that it needs to be encrypted, it needs to be safe, and it needs to be secure. So I'm saying a hackathon could be, how do we do those things, right, with rape kits? How do we get them out to the people, right? We can identify the problems that we're trying to solve in a hackathon. You only have to be a technologist, right? You just have a few technologists there, and they can start working on something with you. So I think that'd be great. So when do you want to do it?
No, we can definitely all come together.
Oh, okay.
Ingrid and I will talk offline.
All right, so let us know. I'd like to be there.
And I can get together with some people.
That'd be excellent.
Sweet, we're organizing already. I love it. This is like the third thing we've organized.
And one thing that's important to note about technology and software in general is, you know, a lot of people, before they actually implement use of technology, they want like the bells and whistles, and they want to be really shiny and things like that. That's not necessarily true or applicable or even feasible. We can take a step back and look at things from a very incremental process and think, you know, from a business standpoint, MVP. What's the minimal viable product that we need to push out to get something to go? You know, if there are 10 components to one application, well, what's the most viable component? And can we take that component, how much more efficient will it make the whole rape kit process be? So when we think about these ideas for our community, it's really important to break them down and think of, okay, well, what's the minimal that I need to make a change? Because what you're going to see, and this is actually I guess the case with gatherings and things like that, is a lot of people, especially, I won't say especially the organizers, but some people, you know, they think big. And there's nothing wrong with thinking big, but when it comes to implementing, things are implemented in a big fashion. Things are very, very much implemented in a smaller fashion. So there's a lot that we can do. We just need to start small with the end in mind, because it gets it's very tedious, and you know you're gonna go through times where like, oh well, screw this, I don't want to do this, and whatever else, and you're gonna get disgruntled, discouraged. We need to stick together, think big, implement small, and you know it's like driving a car at night. You only see the first 15 feet in front of you, and you keep driving until you get to your destination. And you know, as a community, we should have that mindset.
I just wanted to ask for you two, how do you prioritize what you get your AI to work on? So we have problems like the 10,000 rape kits, but I don't think that those are the sexy things that people that usually work in technology want to talk about. So earlier you were like, how do we get to Cuzzos faster? So how do we get the activists and the AI folks to work together to solve like high priority problems?
From a business standpoint, and from a software standpoint, it's very hard for me to work on something I'm not passionate about. So when it comes to me working on something, I always go for what am I passionate about? What do I relate to? And you'll usually find that there's other people that relate to you that can kind of pull you along and give you the motivation you need to get the job done. But from very practical standpoint, things that need to get done that I may not be passionate about, from a business standpoint, people don't invest in ideas, they invest in people. So if I go to an investor and I say, hey, I need a team of software engineers or developers, 4 or 5 people to get the job done, I can sell my passion, I can sell myself. And if that investor or if that person, that individual, that leader is a subject matter expert in whatever I'm pitching, that's as far as I need to go. Because just me telling that person there's a real world need for this and that there's a pipeline to get things done, they'll handle the rest. So when I'm pursuing things, I'm trying to break down what's the most important. I think, okay, what am I passionate about? What am I not going to get burned out about? What can I spend 14 hours a day working on? Okay, that's done. Okay, now what needs to be done? And who do I have to go to get this thing done? And what you'll find often is, if you're a humanly sane person, is the things that you may not be passionate about that need to get done, you become passionate about because those are human problems. So it really boils down to just rolling your sleeve up and just getting started. And once you get to phase 1 or phase 2, phase 3, 4, 5 is really isn't so bad.
I just want to add on to what George is saying. So I think that, again, if you're passionate about something, I say go for it, let people know about it. So like in the case of these kids or anything else, right? I think, so I run a lot of competitions in technology, and we have our cohorts and everything. And they are sometimes 300 people, and sometimes they're 25 people. But those 25 people are very passionate about it, right? So you always got to start with a small group that wants to work on it, right? And then in that small group, you do figure out not just the technology is the bells and whistles, right? Technology is a tool, right? You're digging a hole. You want to dig a hole for some reason, put a post or whatever. You'll use a tool. Technology is that, right? So but what you're trying to do is you've got something of value that you're trying to achieve, some kind of mission, all right? And so people will rally around that mission once a small team starts working on it. And you can find a business value in that mission, 9 times out of 10. So business is an exchange of goods and services. So it's providing things that you need, exchange of needs and wants, all right? So if you come up with something with a small team that's passionate and you clearly state the value proposition, there's a business to it, more than likely. And if not, then there's a nonprofit idea behind, a nonprofit can be put behind it, or straight it could be activism. And we don't want to limit ourselves. We don't want to just say, okay, we just want to do it just because we make money off it, right? We don't want to chase the dollar. But when things are of need and people start to see that, a small group works on it, others will see that and they'll see the value, and you'll have a potential business or a strong activist movement.
I think it's really necessary to make sure that you have social justice activists, creatives, and tech people in one space.
Yep.
And I think in Detroit we're a little siloed. So it's like, do we need like a speed dating night, or what do we need to do to make it fun, to get to know each other, to get to know each other's work, and how we can like support each other? Brandon?
So I wanted to get 3 points. The first, which was asked about how to interrupt or disrupt the school to prison pipeline. I think one of the using technology, and this hadn't occurred to me before that question was asked. But one of the most obvious ways to me is to use these platforms, Twitter, Facebook, social media, other platforms that our youth use, to educate them on how to deal with the police. The police are exploiting the ignorance of young people to feed them into the school to prison life. And I think that if young folks were more educated, and technology like the internet is a prime opportunity to share pieces of information so that young people can protect themselves and sort of shield themselves using the knowledge of the legal system, what their rights are, what police are allowed and are not allowed to do, to protect themselves from being ushered into that pipeline. So I think that's a really simple, straightforward, and direct way is an education campaign for how young people should interact with law enforcement officials. Secondarily, a sister asked about what technology could be deployed in the service of addressing these rape kits. I think a technology as simple as crowdfunding. Brother talked about shame. If a crowdfunding campaign were to raise enough money and enough people were to volunteer to participate in addressing the rape kits, that would be quite shameful to the Detroit Police Department and the city of Detroit. And a friend of mine always says, shame is the glue of society. And I think to varying degrees that can be true. And something as simple as a crowdfunding campaign, which I think the climate currently would definitely support a crowdfunding campaign to that end, could be a piece of technology deployed in that way. And on the tertiary tip, your question, Lauren, about how could that be prioritized, I think shame, once again, it's obvious that a patriarchal system is probably not going to prioritize something like that. And I think we see it over and over again. And so I also believe that it's high time that we do utilize and leverage technology to expose how ridiculous it is that given all the resources we have, that these things have yet to be addressed. So I just wanted to kind of touch all three of those points. And I think all three of which are extremely practical, all three of which any of us can engage in. And we can do so immediately. We don't need any extra steps necessarily to get on the ball in that regard. And I ain't just talking, I'll be first to get on the effort and potentially spearhead.
Thank you for those points.
That was great.
Yeah, that was great. Nate?
Alright, so I think a point, I come more from play technology, really on the blockchain aspect. I wish we had somebody from IoT up there that we have full spectrum.
What is IoT?
Internet of Things, we have the blockchain. Okay,
Internet
so
of Things.
We should speak on IoT just as the myriad, blockchain, AI, IoT, as that's what the new internet is. The internet we know of was built just to do mail better. But my point was, a fundamental thing in all of that, I think, as we were saying earlier, how do you get people stop talking about it and start acting on it? One thing you have to realize is everything is, where we're at now, it's a fundamental shift in everything we know. It's not, fixing the school, the prison pipeline isn't taking old road systems and just throwing it on technology. Brother here was talking about the AI. Yeah, you take a bigoted system and teach a bigoted AI, you have the same bigoted thing, but computers doing it now. And I think an overall arching point that this brother brought up, I think is important, is, and you said, technology, so all these things are just sort of the tool. We can make it more efficient, we can make it faster, we can make it cheaper, we can make it more financially rewarding for everybody. But they're social problems. Everything he mentioned was just social issues. They weren't how we can use blockchain or AI. It's how you can just do all that. I guess that would be my feedback. The response. How do you get people to realize it's a fundamental change in everything they know?
I just wanted to touch on IoT, Internet of Things, for those that don't know. Basically, the concept of IoT is that just about every device that you interact with will have some type of sensor and will relay data to other devices. Things that you just wouldn't traditionally correlate having, some type of intelligence. Things like stop signs communicating to cars and tell cars to stop. Things like mailboxes having sensors let you know when you have mail. IoT is very much taking 5G technology and it's using the extra bandwidth of 5G technology to literally incorporate internet communication with most things that we know. You know, the chair you're sitting on can let you know whether or not someone's present in the room. The shoes that I'm wearing can let me know if my feet smell or if my shoes are getting too big or too small or something like that. So that's basically what IoT is, and you know, there's a lot of projects. We have a couple questions.
Wait, hold on. I noticed that. Sorry. Before you get into that. But to comment on what you're saying, yes, it is a tool, and that we're talking about a shift in consciousness. It's okay. We're talking about a shift in consciousness, and that is what's going to address these social issues. So that's why I was saying in the beginning, it's the humans that are using the tools, and so we really always have to come back to and center our own psychological, mental, and spiritual health at the end of the day, because that is what informs the technology that's being created. I don't know your name, but you.
It's Sierra.
Sierra? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So my question is, so I have a 3-year-old, that's why I'm asking this question. What do you wish that your parents or your guardian or whoever raised you did as a child that you would prepare you for what's going on today? Because I would like to start doing it right now. I'm glad that I came to this meeting. This is my very first meeting. I've been doing all types of stuff in the military, and I'm ready to get more involved. And with my 3-year-old son, I don't want him to grow up the way I did. I went to a charter school. They did not give me the education that I was that I should have gotten. And I just don't want to rely on the school.
Right.
I want to be able to do something at home. So what do you suggest that I can do as a parent right now? As soon as I walk into the store, I'm like, I'm ready. I can't wait to, do whatever it is that they told me that I can do with them. And then from here on out, as he's older and different types of programs, like, working with this. You guys are going to see my faces. You're going to see my son's face. And I hope to get more involved in that, because I'm all for technology and the advancement of technology and getting more involved with other schools. And I don't know how long it's going to take. So I'm going to use you until I can, start those girls.
Awesome. First of all, thank you for your service. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think we all do. And the question was, as a parent, what do you do? Where do you start? Where do you begin to make sure that your child is digitally literate and is a part of all that is going on?
So I have 3 kids, 24, 16, and 14. I put them in coding camps at Wayne State. They didn't want to go, but they did. They went. Take notes. Take notes. I'm gonna quiz you, Courtney. So Wayne State University has great programs. There are other programs. At the high school level, I know they're not there yet. There's a wonderful program. This kind of addresses what we talked about earlier, called Journey, where they train kids in high school how to build websites, and then they build websites and they make money. So there's also DAPSET that has some good programs. You want to look into them, right? As well as UD, as well as there's the Women's Foundation that has a program that goes on. There's a plethora of organizations where you can start getting kids involved. But I think for the really, really young kids, that's DAPSET and UD and Wayne State. Now there might be more as well. But I think that I do programs for ages 11 and up. Our hackathons. Right now, our kids are building an IoT device. It's a vending machine that'll be operated by Twitter hashtag. So you go to this vending machine, you hashtag CS for all, and this robot, plush robot doll will drop down on you. So that's technology. We have 11-year-old kids working on that with the PhD students that are from China. So it's like a cross section of everybody. So also what my parents did very well, and I did, even when my kids grumbled at me, is I brought them to work. I brought them they got to see what I worked on, right? My dad was an architect, and so he put his business next door to our house, talking about black spaces. And he said at age 5, I had to come home from kindergarten and then go to work. I had to take out the garbage and sharpen the pencils. At age 7, I started tracing some of the designs. And by age 9, I was doing floor plans and elevations. And I went with him almost everywhere, and I had to be a part of the conversation. So he forced me to do that. So I thought that was normal. It was normal to design and talk to people about the land survey by age like 12, right? So just trick your kids. Just make them think. Trick them. Make them think that what you know is awesome is the normal everyday thing, and bring them along. And if you don't know it, go with them. I remember the Mount Elliott Makerspace, right? It's a bit different now, but I think they still have some programs there. They would have kids and parents build all types of stuff. Use 3D printing machines. They build speakers out of like a magnet and coil and like a post-it note. Yeah, speaker, those two things, like MacGyver or something. But just be with them, bring them with you, and put them in everything that you hear of that is positive. And never think that it's, don't think of it as, oh, we're doing all the extra good stuff and only the good kids do this. Talk to them like, hey, this is what we always do, right? This is the normal thing. I'm really fortunate. My kids really, they're like focused on all these things like science and dance and soccer and all these things because it was just normal. We just did that stuff all the time, you know. So that's, I would suggest, just trigger. No, but just one more thing is that in the black community, a lot of times we look at ourselves and the system looks at us as a problem, and we always like, oh, we got to make sure our young black men don't become criminals or this or that, right? We're like, 90-some% of us, 99% of us aren't to begin with, right? So that the reality is, and I got that from black male engagement, right? We got to switch that paradigm, right? Just switch it. Just flip that switch, and just all these positive things, they are for your kids, and don't think otherwise.
First off, I want to say that they're already in good hands. I came from a military family too, so I started writing code when I was 15, and I remember I would like cut apart the PlayStation cord and the fan, and I connect them together and cause like electrical outages and stuff like that. But my dad didn't punish me. I mean, I did push-ups, but that was about it. He allowed my natural curiosity to just do its thing. And growing up in a military base, what really opened my eyes was exposure to different cultures. And I'll give you an example. So about 2.5 years ago, I was in Chicago. I was working as a software engineer, and I had a recording studio out there, and I was on the south side, places I shouldn't be. But I'm from the D, so I'm like, whatever, it's just Chicago. And I met someone that was really, I don't want to say ignorant. I don't like that word. More sheltered. He was a young black guy, and we were on the south side near like Humboldt Park area. That's where like UFC, Barack Obama's area, mansion is at. But one wrong turn and you're in the hood. And he told me that he had never been to downtown Chicago. He's 29 years old. Now, if anyone's ever been to Chicago, you can take the CTA for like $1.50 all the way downtown. And this guy had never gone downtown. His entire life he grew up in the hood. And I know personally, and just speaking from personal experience, I grew up in a community with Puerto Ricans, blacks, whites. It didn't matter. Our parents were in the military, they were brothers. And coming back to Detroit and then going to Chicago and seeing those, these very rough areas and seeing how there are these young individuals, kids, and even older males who don't have exposure to other cultures, other lifestyles, other income classes, things like that. It was a hindrance on their personal growth. So I would say, teach them cultures. Even because I can't give you advice and say teach them how to program, because technology is going to be somewhat different. But for all we know, computers might be writing their own programs. 20 years from now, 10 years from now, we have no idea. But to allow their natural curiosity and to just do its thing and to expose them to different cultures and different people so they can see what they're missing and then be more curious about that, that's my big advice. I don't know if I would encourage the whole technological thing. It may not be for them.
In addition to, I was also going to say that, so I grew up on the northwest side of the city, all black, always went to school in the suburbs, so I've never been afraid to interact with people that didn't look like me. But something I think I missed out on was a robust understanding of my own culture. Because what I realize is that when I'm in those spaces with sometimes I don't have the fortitude to stand up for myself. And I think that would come from a better lifelong understanding and appreciation of my own culture. So make sure you immerse this child in the black culture, all that we have to offer, not just the surface level stuff, music and food, but like our history, all the way back to the motherland, the diaspora, like where we are now. I feel like an awareness of our own culture would set the child up for success, in addition to knowing other people's culture.
And that's important so that if they grow up and want to start making technology, they can bring that culture in, which is really key. And I'm sure that there are applications for youth, because I see kids on computers, iPads, iPhones all day, every day playing, and that is him learning in that moment. He's learning about the tech in that moment. So it can be very organic at the exact same time. I just wanted to know if there were some hands in the back. Ulysses? Yeah, okay, Ulysses. Sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
You don't have to answer this. Not right away. How do you imagine using blockchain, machine learning, AI, cryptocurrency to address the value gap in the labor trades? Let's say you have a high-level college degree and the roof on your house falls down, but you're at work. How quickly can you repair your roof or build a building or make shoes without a 3D printer? These are trades that are in high demand and they're not glamorous, and so we don't go in that direction. We would rather do 2 or 3 victory laps in college, be $500,000 in debt, and still grandma's roof is falling down, and you can't help it. So I can imagine how you do it, but how you do it.
So how can technology support the trades, I guess? It's funny you ask that. I was lying in bed this morning, and I've been doing software. I'm only 26. I've been doing software for like 14 years. And I was thinking, as much as I love what I do, how detached I am from what some people might consider the norm. Right? Because for a lot of people, it's magic. To open up a computer, think of something, you start pressing some keys, and then something's working. But when you do that for 10 plus years, you put in 10,000 hours times 50, it becomes almost dehumanizing. And this actually kind of goes back to exposing your children to technology. They're already going to be exposed. But there's a point to where you can overexpose them, and you take away that human element of life. So I have personally began taking classes on the trade. I mean, I just purchased a book on home improvement and the basics of electrical circuits and things like that. And I think where blockchain helps these things out, kind of encourages it, especially cryptocurrencies and things like that. And this might be going too far, but in terms of like an economical standpoint, we don't know where we're going to stand with the US dollar. Okay, we know that our purchasing power is a lot less nowadays than it was 30, 40 years ago. We know that cryptocurrency can help solve that, because we don't know if it will. We don't know to what degree government will actually intervene and say, hey, you know what? We want our hands in the pot too. So we're going to tax this 80%. Or we're going to make blockchain cryptocurrency illegal. But I know that there are a lot of trade professionals out there.
Can you appreciate that we don't care how the money comes to us as long as we get paid scale or higher? $60 an hour is $60 an hour.
So are you discrediting the whole cryptocurrency thing?
Not at all. It's a value gap with people, not.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So here it's $1 or Bitcoin, as long as he gets that same buying power, he needs that purchasing power, regardless of how he gets it.
So let me see if I'm understanding. Are you questioning? It sounds like what you're saying to me is that people get so immersed, and I think George was hitting upon this, in the technology and think that'll be like the solution, be all end all thing, but that's not. It's not. It's again, it's just a tool. Use basic human skills, basic building skills, basic skilled trades, labor, all that. That's in my opinion, and I think it's just a fact, is that those things are always be important, and they should not be discounted at all by addition of technology. Now, how can technology be added to it? I'm hoping that at some point blockchain will say, look, if you can fix my roof, through blockchain, through this cryptocurrency, I'm gonna hook you up with this, right? And it'll be equivalent to $60. Hopefully it'll be even more. That's in my opinion. Again, as we said before, it's just a tool, but it should never ever diminish what people do with their hands and what people do with each other. Is that what you're?
I can part of it, yeah. Okay. I mean, there's an economic control that somebody did 20 years as an iron worker has $1 million more value than somebody with a master's degree after 20 years of work. And they really they're in a position where they can say to you, no, I'm not going to fix your house, I'm not going to fix your car, give me cash or I'm walking away. And we're stuck. I mean, it's the highest job demand in America. It's 3 times higher in Detroit. And we're losing people of color in those trades. The youngest steam fitter in the city is 85. He gets paid something like $300 an hour. And he sits on his butt most of the time.
I don't have a direct answer to that, but I can give you an example to where blockchain is actually, and cryptocurrency is actually helping to contribute to the income gap, the wage gap, not only here in America, but across overseas. So Africa has the highest, especially Nigeria, has the highest fraud rate of any country ever, right? So you post a property for sale, and I guarantee you within 10 hours there's going to be a Nigerian print scam on your property. That's someone saying, hey, send me a picture of a check or something like that, I will see the keys to my property because I'm out of town. So this is the problem. You give up your USD to this person you've never met, and they will theoretically send you these keys that they do not have because it's a scam. So where cryptocurrency comes into play is for the first time in history, we can do business with a developing country when the funds are validated and guaranteed. You now have people that are buying coffee, handmade goods from third world countries living here in America with 100% trust ingrained into the system because of blockchain and cryptocurrency. So it may not be, that I know of, helping to reduce the income and wage gap here locally, but it already has a huge international effect. I mean, you look at the Silk Road, granted most of that stuff was legal activity, but that was driven by blockchain technology. Now you take the Silk Road out of the equation, you still have people that are in developing countries using things like Bitcoin and EOS and Ripple or whatever cryptocurrency you can think of to transact, because there's no systemic oppression or control there. It's all controlled by computers. There's no government saying, oh, you know what, or Western Union saying it's going to charge, it's going to cost you $200 to send $500. It's instant. It's near free, and trust is ingrained in the system itself. So I think we can start to see that happen locally, but it really comes down to adoption. It comes down to supply and demand. When Ford starts paying the people in Bitcoin, we might see some things change. But until our monetary policy remains so systemic, I don't see it happening today or tomorrow. Not in America, at least. It's already happening across the across the globe. 90% of the cryptocurrency usage is overseas. And real things are happening overseas. Look at Dubai. Skyscrapers coming out of the sand. And they have like 40% of all cryptocurrency assets at one point flow through Dubai. So, I definitely feel that cryptocurrency, blockchain technology can help, alleviate this. On a local scale, I'm not sure. Internationally, it's already happening.
Thank you for that global perspective, and thank you, Ulysses, for bringing in the skilled trades, because if we're talking about preserving Black spaces, we quite literally need people with skilled trades. And so it's always very important, and it's an ongoing conversation to ensure that more people of color are being trained with these skilled trades. I just want to give a time marker that we have a little under 15 minutes of this conversation. So I know that you have a question. Who else has a question? Eric and Brandon. Okay, so these last three, we're just going to take them, and then we'll answer, and then we'll have final thoughts, and then we'll socialize. Yeah.
Lauren, I wanted to build off the comment you were making earlier about schools. How do we? Sorry.
Which comment?
So where you were saying that we need to apply Black history, culture, perspective into curriculum in schools. How do we go beyond that to apply the idea of Black spaces into schools, especially multiracial schools, to give Black students in their most formative years a space in which they feel as comfortable as possible, that they can be as vulnerable as possible to discuss, process, internalize, think about these ideas, especially if their classrooms are not monoracial?
That's a good question. I don't know that institutions which in their foundation have a hierarchy of white supremacy. I don't know if institutions can mandate a safe space for people of color to congregate and talk about their history. It's like, it's almost like an oxymoron, right? So I would advocate for programs outside of the school that could do that. I don't expect the school system to ever offer robust African American history. I went to good private school in the burbs, which is supposed to be like the best education ever. And I don't think I learned about Black history until I was like in my 20s. So well after grade school, well after high school, I went to Detroit Mercy down the street, and when I was there in 1990 to 95, we had a sit-in to get an African American Studies program. At the time, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, I wasn't so activisty, so I didn't participate in the sit-in. If that was me today, I would have been leading the sit-in. But me, at that time, I was like, oh, I don't know if I can be a part of this. I'm afraid. I don't want to get kicked out. I don't want to lose my track scholarship. But yeah, in 1990, at that college down the street, they still didn't have an African American Studies program in this all-Black city, in this 90% Black neighborhood. So yeah, I don't trust institutions to do that. It's got to be something outside, and for me, in order to feel truly safe. In institutional spaces, there's always that gaze of other. There's always that threat of doing something that makes somebody uncomfortable. So I don't trust institutional spaces as safe spaces for people of color to be fully expressive and liberated.
So I went to Detroit Public Schools most of my life. I went to Bates Academy, and then I went to Renaissance High School. And it was definitely a safe place for Black bodies. And that's where I got most of my history. The teachers were phenomenal, black, white, didn't matter. But they centered us, our culture, our ways of being. And I think, you know, really, when it comes down to, I don't know if you're a teacher or not, you are? Well then, you know, if you're trying to create that safe place, it's really kind of asking them, what does that look like for you? And what do you want to accomplish in that space, and when do you want me to leave, right? And you have to, as a white-bodied person, be able to say, it's time for me to go, right? And I think that that becomes the uncomfortable space because whites might not know when or when not to, so we just gonna be open about it, okay? And say, okay, now we're getting into a sensitive place, people don't feel comfortable sharing, you have to leave now. We even had that discussion right here on stage, having a conversation about preserving black spaces in a mixed, you know, room. It always comes up, and it's always a little bit of an issue. But then at Renaissance, I was part of Renaissance African Perspectives, and got a fellow Renaissance alum, and it was amazing. And we would attend, maybe you can help me, at U of D High School. They would have this conference, and one of the, and it was the Black Student Union basically of U of D that would hold the conference and invite mostly private schools, most of the black groups from private schools, and Renaissance was the only public school. And they would have a conference, an open forum about how to strengthen the black economy. We're talking about high school. And Herman Jenkins. Oh, was one of the co-founders. Paul Carr was another one. And it was really amazing to bring together black students from all over the metro area to have very serious, empowering conversations at such a young age. And what I remember, it was only black people in there. And it got a little heated, got a little controversial. It was great. But you know, those are just some examples that I lived through, and very thankful that my father made me go from Liggett into public school system. And it was challenging, but it was so rewarding, and it's probably my foundation and what drives me to this day, because I was in that diverse space of all class, subcultures, everything, of all kinds of black people. And you know, you hear me, right? I didn't necessarily fit in. I was the awkward black girl, but I was loved, and they let me be the awkward black girl. And so that's important too, because if you don't fit a certain definition of blackness, you might feel like an outsider. But this is why I love Detroit so much. They didn't do that. I mean, they teased the shit out of me. Don't get me wrong. But by the time I hit college, I was just like so confident about who I am, because they just ended up loving on me. I was like, that's just the way Ingrid is. So you know, those are just my little tidbits and comments about how you can create those beautiful black spaces. The stack. I know Brandon. Oh, Eric.
Did you want to talk about schools too? Aubrey and I went to similar schools. So let me put a disclaimer on my institutional comments. So I went to Country Day for grade school and Mercy for high school. So when I'm talking about places I didn't trust to have a safe black space, it wasn't a predominantly black inner city high school. So it's a very, the presence of other was like always there. Not that we didn't find our own spaces for it, but it's just harder to find when you're like 10% of the student population, and even less of the faculty.
So I'm not going to comment on it.
You went to Cranbrook.
Yeah, we had to fight for our space. Yeah. But I do want to make a point on it. I was looking on the who just get up. So, Malik, is it Malik Yakini?
Yeah.
Okay. The answer Roma is hire Malik Yakini to come in and talk to you how to make a safe black space for black children, the other children. Malik Yakini What he did with the Inter-Roma Institute was the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
He would probably tell you you can't do it because you're not a black person.
Well, have him come in here and help you establish it. And all his staff. That was one of the most amazing school systems I've ever seen when it came to helping black kids recognize and understand who they are in the world, despite all the negatives that are put upon them. I've never seen a group of wide-eyed and conscientious, right? They're aware of the history and systemic issues of racism throughout history, but they were loved on. They were proud of their African ancestry and their African American history, and it was just amazing. Whenever you go to the African World Festival, and you basically people that are part of the Inter-Roma Institute are a big part of running that, and you see a lot of the graduates from that school system, and there's just something about them where they have able to shake loose those negative heavy weights that we carry as African Americans, and it's just amazing. Now we were privileged because the schools we went to and our parents and that kind of stuff, but that school system, it was amazing, and it's a really sad thing that it's gone. But Hire, Malik, McKinney, the consultant, I'm serious, I'm not joking. What they did was amazing.
And he's still doing it.
Yeah.
Eric?
So, with the exception of obvious crack about Skynet, which I did get, there hasn't been much talk about sort of the negative parts of technology, and part of carving out and preserving a space means excluding things that are negative. And when you talk about the school to prison pipeline, one thing you got to think about is, for example, them putting Project Greenlight, which contains facial recognition technology in schools, at bus stops. I mean, all those places, when facial recognition technology, as you know, has been shown to be far less accurate when you're dealing with people of color. So you're basically over-policing. So can you tell me a little bit more about how we go about making sure we exclude, and how do we identify the technology that should be excluded from our lives, which helps sort of over-police us, over-criminalize us, all that.
So actually, one of the startups that's trying to help change that, and they've come to us to help them with that, right? So this, in my opinion, this is where we have to pull out all the stops. It has to be activism. We have to talk to the system. We have to talk amongst ourselves. We have to figure out ways to disrupt that. So I think there's a bit of putting the information out there and shaming the Project Greenlight and making that public and making it and getting everybody that you can behind that, Congress folks, whatever that are down, leaders. We have to push back, because unfortunately the system is still there, and the system will continue to add weight to be discriminatory. And so to fight against that, it has to be the people, it has to be activists. Now, technology, what we can do on that side is build, counteractive AI, right? To kind of help do some of the shaming, right? To have some of the neural networks come together and grab the information and show how there is a discrepancy, and just a hall of shame that pops up and is backed by this activist movement. That's one thing. Then there's just going to the systems that are in place, such as Project Greenlight, and say, look, we know this to be biased. We need a fair and balanced group of developers that are diverse and can eliminate these biasness. So you got to work through the system, and you got to also attack the system.
Another thing is information on the surface. Something like Project Greenlight looks really attractive to business owners. I know Giovanna was thinking about it for this place. I don't know if it's installed yet, but letting people know that bias is programmed in. I don't think that people have an understanding of that. On the surface, it's just like, oh, it'll make my business safer. There are not a lot of lights around here. What could be the downside of it? So I think education, and then if I'm not mistaken, there's a lawyer in the room who may be a part of an ACLU lawsuit that is investigating Project Greenlight, if he wants to talk about that.
I think it's also, I think it's also really important for requiring our politicians to have some tech savvy and understanding. I think that's one of the major issues right now, because they don't have a depth of understanding they might be supporting policies and programs that are actually harmful to the very communities that they're representing. And so, you know, that's one of the main things, you know, as we come towards November and look at your politicians, ask these questions. Now is the time, if ever there was one. Brandon, and you're the last comment for the night.
Okay, I have a comment and a question. The first comment surrounds how do we, like in practical terms, protect black space using technology. And I think that's something that deserves, like how do you leverage technology in that way? One thing that I think that has traditionally and relatively consistently happened to movements that sort of grew out of black spaces is that those movements have been squashed by interlopers, by folks coming in. And so how do we leverage technology to ensure that folks coming into the space are trustworthy, folks coming into the space have good intentions rather than nefarious intentions? How do we leverage technology in that way? And the second thing actually relates to the first, which is, I don't know if it's been discussed, I can't relate, but have we discussed decolonizing the language around technology? That's a huge barrier. You know, the term IoT was brought up by the brother here, and I don't know if we always recognize that language becomes a barrier to engagement and understanding. And so, within black spaces, are we doing enough? Are we exploring how the ways that we talk about technology, how the ways that we share information regarding technology, and even what technology is? It's the scientific application of knowledge toward practical purpose. And I mean, that's simple, but you know, we have this word that is sort of a barrier to some degree. Sometimes when you say technology, people are like, oh, I don't mess with that. I don't do all that technology stuff. But if you say it in a different way, I think everybody wants to use scientific knowledge or knowledge gained for practical purposes, and then it becomes a little ridiculous to say that you don't deal with technology. And so I think that's one of the first and major barriers to protecting black space, which is we don't even understand how we could leverage this other thing that we call technology to do so.
I think decolonizing language is such a great point. And I found that with blockchain technology, it's almost like it's intentional to intimidate people. Really is not that deep. It's really not that difficult. But I don't know, number one, if the tech people who have been talking about it understand how to properly teach it. And they've been leading the way thus far. And it's only now that those of us who are organizers, teachers, social justice activists, and all these other areas are moving into blockchain technology to responsibly teach this one type of technology, and I think that is so key. And I talk about that, how do we enter community to teach technology in the most appropriate, intentional manner. I would love for you guys to answer that, give final thoughts, and also please share what we should be looking for on the horizon. Sorry to go first.
So when it comes to actually deploying technology for the greater good, for our benefits, it's one of those things where it's just, you have to be creative. You know, there's so much you can do. If you can think of it, technology can do it. When it comes, you know, to someone walking through this door, you know, we obviously don't want things like Project Greenlight, but I think something simple as a badge or a QR code. I think the problem that we have as a society is that we want to adopt the latest and greatest, but the latest and greatest isn't always the best. And the problem with blockchain technology especially is there are a million different blockchains themselves, and they each operate differently. And as we develop this, we don't know what it's going to look like 2 or 3 days from now. So, in terms of practicality and just putting it out there, I think that there should be some type of delay. Hey, let's wait 6 months to see what the repercussions. Let's watch other people do it and see what happens. We don't always need to be on the cutting or bleeding edge of everything. You know, if things tank, and look at the Titanic, right? Oh, it's the unsinkable. It's the latest and greatest. You know, people just, when the tickets were on sale, they jumped on board. You know, and there were some people that said, hold on, let me just wait and see how this thing goes. And when it comes to the actual, you know, the vocabulary and things like that, I have a rule that I really stand by, which it upsets me when people don't actually take this rule that I have and run with it, is I don't use things like acronyms, IoT, and an acronym can mean 30 different things to 30 different people. So when I actually explain technology, I like to just put it in plain English. And I always make sure that I have something that I can correlate it to. Oh, it's like this, or it's like this. You know, there's actually no need, and this is technology in general, to use acronyms. You know, I can't stand it when I'm working my 9-to-5 job and we're in the chat channel, and someone says, "Hey, PTO or DFBZ is offline." I've been working there for X amount of years, and I've been doing this for 12 years, and I still know what that means, right? Because that can mean something else that we're working on. So it's being very explicit with the way you explain things and understand that not everyone is at your level of comprehension. Most people aren't, especially in technology. You know, I could be the top 5% out of everyone, you know, all technologists out there, or all software developers, software engineers. So it's really intentionally knowing that. And there's a certain level of pride that you'll get when you can go to someone and you can talk to someone about something, explain it, and they go, "Hey, I like the way you explained that. 20 other people told me something, but I understood when you got it because you put it in plain English." So there's just certain things that you do and you don't do. And I think people that have some degree of technological experience and business experience understand that. Because when you're dealing with business, you're not just dealing with technologists or software engineers or whatever else. You're dealing with accountants, you're dealing with CFOs, CEOs, you know, you're dealing with people from a vast majority of disciplines that need to understand this. And you can always kind of tell where someone is in the spectrum by the way that they speak. You know, if someone is if you need a dictionary to talk to someone about a certain type of technology, it probably gives you a good sense that they're probably more behind the scenes and that they're not calling the shots. So, you know, those are just rules that I live by personally.
Sure, I'll go. A couple of different things. Before we get people to adopt technology as something that's for them, we got to get computers in hands. Like if 35% of the people in Detroit are in poverty, that's like 250,000 people that likely don't have computers or the internet. So how we're talking about, get everybody on blockchain, get everybody into technology. There are people that are dealing with so many other problems. And I think this is where a translator can come in. If there is a person who can translate for people how blockchain technology can solve some of their everyday problems, it'll be something that they can buy into. So you need good translators, but people also need the equipment. Like how you need to, and I know you can go to a library, maybe you have computers at school, but you don't really get the skill set that you need to move forward with that kind of stuff unless you can practice on it at home. So we need good translators, people need equipment, and I think you need some around the way folks that do this stuff. So I know that you guys are black and you're in blockchain, but you're a certain kind of black, which is off-putting to some people, and I only know because I've been that person before, actually on both sides. So I'm saying you need some people that are approachable and accessible to the masses that can represent this technology so people can see themselves in this space. Because I think right now it's very it's elitist, it's kind of out of reach to the masses. So work on those things. Translation, who's representing this technology, and people getting the actual tools, the physical tools into their hands. And then Ingrid said, what's on the horizon? I can't talk too much about it, but be on the lookout for a black arts and culture venue in this commercial corridor in the near future. That's almost it.
Can't follow up with that. Okay, good night. So there's two things. So one of the reasons why I've done everything that I've done with technology, and again, I'm not a coder, but I saw the need for people to become coders and learn artificial intelligence, is that I've seen our black kids being taught or told about technology, and they intimidated by it, and I hated that. I really hate that intimidation. And so what our mission is at TrainX, and we're going to do it when we say it, is to just to let these kids know, or any individuals know, I don't care if they're 99 years old, that again, technology is theirs. It's not above them. They are worthy to use whatever is out there and to learn. And so, our program is on the horizon for us. Is we're going to have a couple workshops that will explain what artificial intelligence is. We're going to have some demonstrations. We are going to invite people into the ending of our cohorts, so people could see the other black faces that have just learned artificial intelligence, and to let them know that they can learn it too if they want to. But let's be real, it's not for everyone, right? Artificial intelligence, you kind of have to be that person that likes to find that needle in the haystack. You have to at this point, right? It's not like building a website, right? But we don't need to be leaders. We need to honor the skilled trades, the laborers, right? To help build black spaces, we need to celebrate all these different skill sets that we have, and we need to come together, because we can't operate in silos and be elitists. And I'm good over here with my technology. I don't need to deal with skilled trade or whatever. No, we need to come together to make more that way. And so, underneath the underlying thing behind all of this is just belief that we can, and that we should, and that we own.
I have nothing about what's on the horizon. So I just have one more thing about what's on the horizon. Actually, two things. Expect for every major website that you use to become decentralized. What that means is the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Instagrams, whatever you use, they will be put on the blockchain, and their actual existence will not be held by Facebook at a single data center, one conglomerate company owning all your data, but you will own your own data through blockchain technology. And we don't have enough time for me to elaborate on that, but it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And the second thing is, I've seen this a lot, especially in black tech spaces, is everything's being recreated, which is good, because the marginal overhead for creating something is so low. Just recently, my co-founder sent me an article, because her and I had this idea a while ago, about a black LinkedIn. A LinkedIn just for black professionals. Because we all know LinkedIn's kind of skewed. If you've ever been, what's that? Black people meets. But expect everything to be decentralized, and for the most part, there's a lot of these social platforms, and businesses also, professional businesses also social, that are being recreated for blacks, because we are in such an era where everything's so transparent. We can just, we can see through the BS. So there are people stepping up, and I urge you guys to really just support them, sign up for it. Doesn't mean you have to use it. It doesn't have to be your go-to. Just check it out. Give them some feedback. And not just locally, if you hear about a brother or sister doing something down in ATL, reach out. Read their blog. Change where you get your news source from. Just very small things that we can do.
So essentially, preserving black spaces begins with us, individually. Doing our part, our little part, our big part, technological or not. But as long as we have that vision, I think that we will eventually accomplish the goal. Already, we've organized how many events here? I lost count. Thank you so much for sharing all of your ideas and your questions. If you have more, there is the Detroit Blockchainers Meetup Group. Please Google them. They have a hackathon every Wednesday. You can just enter the space. It's at Red Door. And ask any question that you may have about blockchain technology and cryptocurrency. And, yeah, I'm not done. And then there's also Detroit Blockchain Center that Nate Talbot is the co-founder of and EOS Detroit supports. Together as partners, we create blockchain workshops. So they're for the novice, the beginner. We just talk about it, we break it down in little bite-sized pieces. It's really easy. So always approach me or Nate if you want to do a blockchain workshop in your home, in your church, in your office. It doesn't matter where. We're open as long as we can project. We're good. And then also, EOS Detroit has a newsletter, and our mailing list is over there. So if you sign up, you'll get the newsletter, and you'll learn more about EOS, the new blockchain that launched this year. So just to give you some scope, Bitcoin launched in 2009, and then EOS launched this year. And so EOS is a different kind of blockchain, and we would love for you to learn more about it. And so the newsletter, it might be a little techy, but you know, sometimes the challenge is the way that you learn. And what else? I think that's about it. Please like us on Facebook if you want to know more about the events that we're putting on in October. I think October is about government and blockchain technology. In November, we're going to be talking about marijuana industry and blockchain technology. Vote yes, by the way. And so, yeah, so there's many things on the horizon with EOS Detroit. Again, thank you so much for coming out. Thank you, Lauren, George, and Aubrey for sharing your expertise and knowledge. This was a lot of fun. Thank you, Detroit Zip. Appreciate it. Good night.